Hello, hello, it's me, Eli. Hello. Okay, so this took me a while to do. In order to make this video, I had to watch the entirety of the One Piece live-action series that just came out on Netflix, and I also then had to draw a picture for this, and also had to do my notes and all this other stuff, so it's been a minute, point being. So, if you're joining this channel for the first time for God knows what reason, then this is primarily an art channel, but also I do video essays and I just talk about stuff and blah blah blah. It's just all variety channel for all things me, I guess. So in this one, you're going to be seeing me draw a picture in the background as a time lapse, but it's mainly just free-form commentary on me talking about my thoughts on the show. So it's not going to be pre-formatted or anything like that. So, I have my notes off to the side, and I have my thoughts inside my head, and I have some gumption in my belly, or whatever, I don't know. So, I've got everything that I need, except for water. I don't have enough water. So, alright, first of all, my experience with One Piece. I keep up with the manga. I read it whenever it comes out. I have only read through it once, though. As a result, there are, in addition to the fact that I have a really crummy memory, I will easily forget character names, I will forget that things happened, especially with One Piece, because One Piece is a very long series. It's been going on for a very long time. Not quite the entirety of my entire life, since I was born in '82, thank goodness. It's not Detective Conan or anything like that. But it is an extremely voluminous undertaking for anyone that wants to get involved in it. So some of you may be watching the One Piece live-action adaptation for the first time simply to get a good idea of what it's supposed to be because it feels like a good entry point. Which I really can't blame you for. So, first off, some general sentiments. The One Piece show itself on Netflix, is it good? Yes, it's fairly good. I don't have any major complaints about it. There are some very obvious complaints to be made, such as it's live action, so it's not going to look as cartoony and engaging as like the anime might look or the manga might look. It is something that is being adapted from a more prototypical art style, one that has its roots in the Rubber Hose era or the Disney era. Oda really enjoys his cartoon antics, his Tom and Jerry antics, and consequently, it is quite difficult to adapt that into live action, and they've done an okay job of it. Is it perfect? No, it is not. It most assuredly is not. There are many things that they simply could not do, and there's many things that they in the future will most assuredly not be able to do without spoiling things. So, there's going to have to be a lot of changes for the sake of adaptation. And I think they have been doing a good job in consistently figuring out ways of pulling that off. So, in terms of like non-spoilers, and like if you want to hear me go all in on this, then, you know, obviously watch the series first. But series good. Good series. Good series. Very good. Well, not that good, but pretty good series. Good boy. So, that is my review for the One Piece thing without actually having to go into it. So, if that's all you wanted, there you go. It's all right. I don't have any major criticisms. It isn't like Cowboy Bebop where they royally poop themselves trying to change things that didn't need to be changed. You can tell that the people that made this wanted to be as true to the ideas in the original as they possibly could. And that is typically a problem whenever you're dealing with any sort of adaptation. Because what is often the case is that the people that are within the industry do not care about the thing that they're adapting. They just know that it's going to make a lot of money if they have the name on the tin. A good example of that recently might be the Witcher series, in the sense of yes, the characters are there, but obviously the people that are making the Witcher series do not really respect the original source material particularly much, and consequently, you can tell that they wanted to tell their own personal stories while giving minimal deference to the original source material, which is often a big problem. My own personal experience with that would probably be something like, here's a completely pointless example. I played Guild Wars a lot back in the day, from 2001 onwards. Guild Wars 1. And whenever Guild Wars 2 came out, they had new writers, and the new writers would often very proudly proclaim that they had no idea what happened in the original game, and they do not care. And you could tell. These days, they do make more references to prior material, although it's more for the sake of just, stealing content. Just having something as a baseline to make new content from. But yeah, that was definitely a case of the new writers not caring about the old writers, that sort of thing. That's a big problem usually within the industry. In this case, you can tell that they did care. They cared a lot. And they made some very careful, wise decisions in trying to adapt things that otherwise would be considered normally to be unadaptable. So, there you go. There's my full spoiler-free review. From this point forward, spoilers. Sort of. I'm not going to get too much into the nitty-gritty. Because, one, I don't remember enough about the manga. Having, I've been keeping up with it monthly. The last time I read the first chapters was a long time ago, so it's been a hot minute. I'm not a One Piece channel, so don't expect me to be able to tell you the names of every last single character. I have more obscure information, like, for example, the series has fucking Bogart inside of it, which is amazing to me that they actually bothered with that, because even Oda doesn't seem to remember that he existed. He's Garp's right-hand man. He's the guy with the hat. The funny thing about him is that he's not even named in the manga. And he went missing the manga for over a decade or something. And he only very, very recently propped back up. During the chapter where Garp does his Galaxy Fist move, I think you can see him very roughly as a sketch in the background. And he's almost only identifiable because he has his hat. And that is the first time that he's been referenced at all in a very long time. And even in the anime, because he doesn't have a name in the manga, whenever he had one line of dialogue, he had a few lines of dialogue. It's not just one. But whenever he had dialogue, they had to give a writing, actor credit for that person. So he just has his name listed as Bogart. And that's where we get his name from. Otherwise, he's a character that's never been named before. So, seeing him in the One Piece live action was kind of wild in a weird way. And actually seeing him actually get dialogue and being treated as someone that's relatively important was kind of neat. So just little things like that. I know some things. Although if you ask me, what are the names of the two giants that they're supposed to run into that are doing their eternal conflict thing, and then eventually they leave and they return to Elbath because they showed up recently. I can't remember their names. Groggy and something? I can't remember. But that's where I'm at in One Piece. I sort of know things, but I don't. I have a very bad memory, so those two things do not work well together. There's a lot of events where I sort of remember it happening, take them recruiting Chopper. I remember it happening, I don't really remember anything about it, other than there's the old granny character, and her body is weirdly hot, but she's old. And also Reindeer and Man Wapol that eats everything. He ate everything. And he tried to shoot a flag, but Luffy wouldn't let him. And something happened. There was an old man who think something is like the old man was doing something positively for the village, but they hated him for some reason. I can't remember a single thing about it. So that is what it's like talking to me about One Piece. I vaguely recall things. And the more recent it is, the more accurately I might remember it, but probably not. So, in a way, it's kind of a good thing to talk to me about things like this, because I have a more fresh eye for certain things. And I'm not going to care that much about them getting things wrong. Because if something is different in the manga as opposed to what they did in the live action, I'm not going to care, because I don't really remember that much about it. What I do remember is that there are certain things that they changed that, like, for example, Garp was not that present. He wasn't pursuing Luffy like he was in the live action thing. But I did like that. It's a little bit more of a Western way of telling that story, in the sense of there always has to be like this direct antagonistic force, and there's more of a focus on having multiple storylines going at the same time, and then them coming together at the end. It's sort of a typical formatting that you'll find in Western media, and that it's well suited for it. The whole Garp storyline, that does make sense. They did a good job with that. And I also appreciated the fact that the sort of training with Kobe and Helmeppo, is that what his name is? I think so. Even though it's not exactly training, but the fact that they were introduced into the Marines is more than it was in the manga. Because in the manga, this is just a cover story. It's just individual cover illustrations that showed them sort of doing things, and it's left up to your imagination as to what happened. Actually seeing it depicted on screen was pretty interesting, which is something I actually hope that they end up doing more in the future. Because if they try to slavishly just recreate every single thing that happened in the manga, then it's not going to go well, because there's just too much. They already did that in Season 1, combining like what happened with Buggy and Arlong Park and all this other stuff. They did a fairly good job of pulling that off. And when it comes to writing a story, the events don't really matter exactly. I know that probably sounds treasonous. The events don't matter so much as the messaging of the story and what happens to the characters and how the characters respond. Because the story is always going to be your characters. It's not the events, it's the people that are composing the events and their motivations. Some people may disagree with that. I agree with myself, though, and that's what's important. So, when it comes to adapting things like that, what really matters is staying true to how the characters behave and how they would respond to situations, and then combining those situations, or even broadening their scope, to be able to convey the circumstances that the characters are responding to the most accurate way possible. And they did a good job with that. Even though it isn't one-to-one, it doesn't matter. It's like, I don't know, why did Professor X form the X-Men or something? It doesn't matter. It could have been because of Magneto, it could have been because of the Shadow King like it originally was. It doesn't matter at all. What actually matters is the fact that he did it, and he did it for an important reason, and part of that reason was ensuring the cooperation between mutants and humanity and things like that. That's what actually is important. If you manage to pull off both of those things at the same time, all for the better. It's sort of like the sliding scale in comics, since I'm thinking about comics. Like in the past, like Magneto, obviously the Holocaust was a big part of his character. I don't think that has changed. But there are many elements in comics where you look back at it and you say, well, this character did this because this was happening in, around the Vietnam War or something. And now instead of it being the Vietnam War, it's now the Iraq War in the 1990s. Or even that's become a little bit old hat, so now it's more the like Afghani conflict or things like that. So that's another case of it doesn't actually matter what the circumstances were precisely. What actually matters is whether or not it corresponds to the character and what they're doing and why they're doing it. So, as far as my notes go, I have some general thoughts. I did this by an episode basis. One of the first things that I put down is that, as far as the combat goes, it has to be a little bit more grounded. Because even in early One Piece, characters were doing things that are just wildly disproportionate to what actual people can do. Because One Piece is a more cartoony series. So in a weird way, it almost comes across as being more like a typical pirate movie with some fantasy elements inside of it sometimes. And I recall actually writing down the phrase, it sort of seems like Pirates of the Caribbean sometimes, and then I backspaced because I realized that's not really accurate at all. But I hope you get the idea of what I'm going for with that, is that it actually feels like a pirate movie. Which, One Piece, despite the fact that it is this world of pirates, often doesn't feel like it's about pirates at all. Especially as you go through the series and it gets more and more distant from that idea. It makes absolutely no sense that it has anything to do with pirates at all. And that's even ignoring the fact that Luffy is all about, I'm a pirate, I'm going to be the king of the pirates. What do you do that's pirate-like, Luffy? And the answer is nothing. He doesn't do anything that's pirate-like. Like, the whole reason why Luffy and them can get by is because they sail from one island to the next, and they just so happen to find a situation where people are in need, and after they rescue the people, they are given something as a reward. Whether that thing is money, or whether it's a new ship, or whatever else. And the question is of, how are they feeding themselves? It's something that's never really addressed too often. You could assume they're on the ocean, so they eat fish, or something like that. There's presumably fish all over the place. But it's just one of those things that are just... It's never important. Because it's this story about them going on some grand adventure, and when it comes to going on grand adventures in most stories, the author doesn't care about the logistics of how it's even happening. And that's kind of a typical problem in like superhero stories. Because yes, they are superheroes and they are rescuing people. But also, most of the time they are not getting paid by anyone. They're just doing it. Because it's a fun adventure to look at. So you have to question, how are they financing this? How are they keeping themselves alive? How exactly does this lifestyle correspond with the necessities of basic living? And the actual answer is it doesn't. The author doesn't care, and you're not supposed to question that element of it. So, One Piece is sort of similar in that respect. How exactly are they pirates whenever they don't do anything even remotely pirate-like? And every single time that they need to eat, they just run into someone that's being assaulted by a bandit or something and then punch the bandit, and then the person just gives them a free meal. And then it's another element of their requirements, their daily nutritional requirements. It's never brought up again until it needs to be another plot point. This is how it goes. So, when it comes to the combat, whenever you're watching it, it does really look more grounded. And it does help it a little bit in establishing the world. I think that's very beneficial. One thing that I noticed in regards to that is Zoro, the swordsman, very famously fights with a 3-sword style. Maybe one day he'll fight with a 9-sword style. I don't know. He fights with a 3-sword style. In real life, whenever the actor has to do it, you can tell instantly how that is so completely impractical. I'm not even talking about it makes no sense. It never makes any sense. Even him doing it in the manga, it makes no real sense. Like, having another one in your mouth does not really benefit you in any way whatsoever. Even if he's, like, spinning around, so he's, like, slashing. It's like the Bart and Lisa thing. I'm gonna And in the case of Zoro, like, I'm going to start spinning around with this blade in my mouth, and if you get hit, then it's your fault. It is ridiculous. I mean, at that point, you don't even need to have it be a 3-sword style. You can just weld a bunch of swords to your body. Like, I'm thinking of, there's a character in Star Wars that wore a suit that was effectively made out of lightsabers, because it had emitters, like, on his elbow and on his like, wrists and his legs, so there were just lightsabers pointed in every single direction. It sounds like I'm making this up, but this is real. It's fucking stupid. He could just do that. Holding it in his mouth that doesn't do anything. It's not a ambidextrous part of his body that he can use to wield the sword in the first place. But of course it goes back to Batman logic of, well, he's just so good. Like, how does Batman do all the things that he does without getting hit? Oh, he's just real good. He's really, really good. I was in my Hunter x Hunter script. I still don't have an editor for it. I will put out a thing on Twitter soon. But in my Hunter x Hunter script, that's one of the things I make fun of, is how is Gon, just so great at everything? There's not really an explanation until later when he actually does get Nen, then there is an explanation. But before that, how come he can do all the things that no one else can? And the answer is, he's just real good. He's very, very good. And that's it. And sometimes the he's just real good argument gets a little bit tiring, but in more of a fantastic world like this, suspension of disbelief kicks in, and you don't really care. But anyways, you can tell that the actor, whenever he's doing the 3-sword style, is extremely uncomfortable doing it. It's kind of funny. And he even tries to... I think he has like one line of dialogue where he's trying to say something while he has it in his mouth, and it's barely comprehensible, because the hilt of a sword is huge. It can just barely fit inside of your mouth. You know that feeling like going to the dentist and they have to pry open your mouth, and whenever you're finally done, it's like, That, because your mouth has been open too long and at too dramatic of an angle, I imagine it probably felt like that. I would love to hear what he had to say about it, because it looks like it was intensely uncomfortable. But anyways, this is another example of that. Whenever you're translating basic things like that, it's going to get kind of weird. Most of the combat, though, at least as far as the first season and this early stuff goes, a lot of it is fairly grounded other than Luffy's stuff, since, he's the stretchy man. He stretches and punches. But that can be done with CG, and that's the signature thing in the series. So obviously it's the thing that they're going to be the most prepared for, and that's where a lot of their financing is going to go into, and you don't really have to do it that often. It kind of depends on the situation that he's in originally, but usually if he does one attack with it, that's often enough in the early parts of the series. Now, as time goes on, that might change, but we'll see. I'm drawing Nico Robin. She's not in the series because, she comes later, alongside Frankie and Chopper. I think it goes Chopper, then Frankie, then Robin, doesn't it? Although Robin shows up earlier because she's a villain for a brief amount of time. Frankie is going to be the... Early Frankie will be fine. Pre-time skip Frankie will be absolutely fine because there's almost nothing to worry about. Because he's just a guy in a Speedo. The only thing you're going to have to worry about is a little bit of slippage when it comes to him moving around. But other than that, they can just have the actor wear a prosthetic for very specific things, and with a little bit of camera trickery, it shouldn't be that much of a problem, I don't think. With Robin, that's going to have to be CG. Mostly. There are probably some parts of it where you could just have a little thing in a hole in a wall or something and have a hand come out and slap someone in the face or whatever. You could do stuff like that and get away with not having CG for some of it. So a lot of that could be practical. They're experts in their field, so I'm sure that there's not going to be much of a concern there. Chopper is the big one. Because Chopper is a little bitty reindeer man. even if he was a little bit more horrifying to look at in the early parts of the series before Oda finally gave in, it's like, okay, fine, I'll make him cute. God damn it. I didn't want to make him cute, but I'll make him cute. And that's exactly what I did. There was, early on, there was a specific character designer that drew him cute and showed him the model sheets for the anime. And he said, after he saw that, he's like, okay, I'm sorry. I was being hard-headed. I'll make him cute. I'll turn him into a mascot. And he's a mascot to this day. But then again, that's most of the cast, isn't it? Most of the cast doesn't really do much these days. They kind of just stand around, and ever so often, Chopper will pretend he's a doctor again, and Frankie will say cola, and we'll all clap. But other than that, it's pretty much just the Luffy, Zoro, and sometimes Sanji show. But anyways, that's another problem. So, how they deal with Chopper, I don't know. He's going to have to... I hope they don't do something where... Oh man, it would be so bad if they decided, well, we'll have like a little person, like someone with dwarfism. A dwarf. We'll have a dwarf play him in the show. And they put him in like typical makeup. Oh, it would look so bad. Nothing against their ability to like... Nothing against a potential actor doing it or the people actually doing the makeup. But I can't possibly imagine it would look too great. Like, can you imagine it just being like some dude? Like sure, if you get any actor that knows his shit, he's going to do a good job, I would assume. But it would just be amazing if it was just some guy and he showed up like, hey, I'm Chopper, what's going on? Oh, you bastard, don't compliment me, I'm the cute reindeer man, check it out. I'll heal the lots of you. And it's got like transparently like I'm a 32-year-old man and a cute reindeer outfit sort of look to him. I would kind of love that. I won't lie. I kind of want to see that now. Damn it. I mean, you could easily do a Detective Pikachu thing where he's just CG, but that's a lot of money. And whenever they do that, that's for movies. That's for something with a very short runtime and a lot of money being pumped into it. A lot of money is going into this series. I think they said something like 80 million episode or something crazy. But there's there's only so much money. You can't keep doing that. I hope they don't do a thing where they just make him barely present in the show. Or just that you always see the back of his head or something. The best option would be if they just do a sort of Grogu thing, you know, Baby Yoda, and they just have it be as traditional as they possibly can. And then sometimes they have to use CG. It will look wonky. It will. But I think that people will get used to it in the same way that you get used to Arlong. Like, a lot of people early were complaining about Arlong in the early trailer shots. And yeah, he looks a little bit weird since it's just a guy with a big Arlong head. But then I went back and looked at the manga, and he kind of looks very similar. He wasn't as jacked as I remember. Because I guess I kind of just imagine Jinbei. And, you know, my head fills in the blank. That's not really what it was. I don't know. They'll figure out something. Not important. Okay, so. Next thing in my notes. The events are compressed, but the stories are about character actions, not events. I just talked about that, so thank you very much, notes. They just need the time to be told. That is correct, thank you. I was surprised to see Bogard, of course, which I already talked about. And Garp's dog hat, yes. Remember Garp's dog hat that he had for some reason? I am not sure why he had that early in the series, but he did. And he did here too. He eventually, just like the original, just stops wearing it. But I was glad to see it there. I appreciated his ridiculous little dog hat that he wore sometimes. Oh, the transponder snails. They're so weird looking, and that's very fitting. Whenever I'm thinking about traditional effects having a certain charm to them, but being a little bit fucked up. Transponder snails are a really good example of that, because they are kind of disturbing to look at, but kind of fun as a result. Also, I was glad to see Kobe's training, since it ended up being so important to, compared to the cover story. Yes, I mentioned that already. But more specifically, I was glad to see that Kobe actually had more of an arc to him, because the way that that ended up playing out is... in the original, it kind of just jumped forward. There was like a few scenes, with him punching Luffy at some point later on as well. Marineford stuff happening as well. But you don't really... One Piece, it kind of does this. It has that problem sometimes where things happen, but there's not really a good indication of how they happened. Like recently, villains from the past showing up and they're way stronger than they used to be. They're still not a threat to the crew anymore, because the crew is like Yonko level at this point. But they show up and they're just way stronger. And what's especially weird is, what's his name? Kaku? I think it starts with a K. It's the giraffe guy, the one that does the kicks. He got his devil fruit, like, in that prior arc with Robin. Like, he had just eaten it, and he turned into a giraffe man for the very first time as the fight was happening. And now 2 years later, he has already awakened his ability to use it. That's pretty impressive. Because it's kind of funny looking back at things like that, because early on, there was no indication that Haki even existed. And especially that awakenings even existed. Because the first time we even see anything remotely similar to that is, I think, Impelled Down. And that's only from the... I think they said that they fed the Zoan fruits to, like, weapons. And that's the reason why they looked the way that they did. I can't remember. But there were the weird, like, beast creatures that served Impel Down. And I think those were the first time we ever see something that's an awakened Zoan. And it isn't until much later on, and by the way, right here, my Clip Studio Paint crashed for no explicit reason. I had to stop recording. Thanks, Clip Studio Paint. So I ended up having to redo all this. But yeah, it's a very quick jump for him. It's kind of strange that he got that strong that quickly. So yeah, let's see. Kuro, the glove knife man. In live action, he's a little bit weird looking, which I guess is fitting. The actor is a little bit... There's something about his makeup. I can't quite place it. He's a little bit strange looking. You get used to it, though. But as you do get used to him, it looks a little bit more natural. His performance was a little bit hammy, but I guess it's pretty fitting for One Piece. I did have one note in my... I wrote one thing down, though. He doesn't adjust his glasses enough. And I write in parentheses, more annoying, please. Because I do remember that from the manga. He was, in the anime, I guess. I never watched the anime, but he adjusts his glasses constantly, to the point where it actually gets on your nerves watching it. And he only does it probably like 4 or 5 times. Whereas in the original, he was doing it in every single scene, to the point you're like, just get contacts. You're driving me crazy here. Anyways, good job tying elements together with the Marine storyline, Buggy, Arlong, and Nami. I already talked about that. They did a good job of trying to combine every element that they possibly could. They only had so many episodes to work with, and they really had to compress events together in such a way that it still was fitting to what happened in the story, and they did a good job of doing it. Good job. Something that I write down here is that I feel like people that are actually new to the series might not actually get attached to the characters. And that's something that I was actually considering. I actually considered the idea of getting my girlfriend to watch it, because she has no experience with One Piece. She has no clue what's going on with One Piece. And I figured maybe she might enjoy it. So I was briefly considering the idea of having her like pop in, or you just, get her general thoughts on it, write those down. But no time for that, unfortunately. There's just too much to cover and too much to do. But I feel like, obviously, One Piece is like one of the biggest things in the world. A lot of people tuned in for it. It's one, I think it had like the ratings for it actually killed. Like it was way more popular than they expected, I think. But a lot of that is because people just really know One Piece. It's a very famous product. So if someone is completely new to One Piece in every single way, I'm not sure how attached they would actually get to anything. I have seen, to be fair, some people that said that they had no experience whatsoever with One Piece, and now they're picking up like the manga or watching the anime or whatever. So it has happened. But I would be curious, if you're in the comment section and you have no experience whatsoever with One Piece, like especially if to the point where you've barely heard anything about it or something like that, then I would be curious to see what your response to this series was, because it's not like it's an amazing series or anything. It's fun, but I'm not sure how fun. We will see. Be interested to see just some discussion about that. Because whenever you're adapting things like that, it's weird, because there's a lot of burden that goes into it. Because if people are already in love with these characters from a completely different media, then whenever you make it, you have to live up to their unrealistic expectations for the characters. And sometimes they'll even go, how come they did that? And they don't remember that it was in the original, or, stuff like that. And then there's the inverse problem of a lot of people will be bringing their love for the character into the show, so it's already baked in. You don't actually even have to really try. So whenever you bring someone that's completely new to the series in every single way, then you'll have another problem where you're assuming a lot of the series and it's unwarranted. I've talked about this in the past, but whenever you're writing a story, like you're writing a novel or anything, writers have the same problem, where they sit around and they fantasize about their characters, like how would they act in this situation? What would they do if they were exposed to this other character? And they get so used to doing that they have this really keen idea of what the character is, and they love the character in their head. But then they forget, I need to actually do that on the page as well. I need to do it on the screen. And as a result, anyone that's reading their thing for the first time is not going to get that same feeling out of it, because they're not bringing all this sort of emotional baggage or whatever with them in order to pre-establish all these feelings. That's another problem that you have to worry about if you're a writer. So, yeah, I'd be curious to see. Something I noticed in the episode where it depicts Zoro's childhood, before, the choreography in most of the scenes is very kind of typical Western, where it's trying to be somewhat realistic. Somewhat. It's still... This is One Piece we're talking about. But whenever it goes back to his training, I noticed that the choreography for the action... I didn't watch it more than once. It could have been just one of the actors. But I did notice that it was way more Japanese, in that you guys will know what I'm talking about. If you've ever seen Japanese anything live action, whenever they do anything like action focused, there's way more like gesticulations and unrealistic things that people do, where they're like flailing around and kind of moving their arms and their head in a very specific way that I can't describe to you exactly. Here we are, final drawing. But it is rooted in theater, because that's the way that Japanese cinema is. They're actually like it's more performative in the sense of, if you're doing something on stage, like even in Western stuff, you have to do it so that the whole audience can see you in the background. So your actions are way more gesticular. Whereas opposed to, if you're doing it for like an American movie, you can rely on like zooming in on characters' expressions and things, so you don't have to worry about it. So it's way more realistic looking. But anyways, wow. I need way more time to talk about this. Something I also wrote down, Luffy's actor looks psychotic sometimes, especially when he was fighting Kuro. He looks fucking crazy sometimes. Usopp lacking a nose is something I did not notice at all until he drew the flag that has this tiny little nub nose sticking out of it. That was a little bit distracting. Mihawk seemed appropriately strong. He has a great voice, but like most of the other characters, his design sort of falls apart if you view him at too much of a distance. He looks a little bit silly in the full coat whenever you are not getting a really good camera angle on him. The Warlord system was explained fairly well without having to bring up the Yonkos. Appreciated that. One Piece in general, I wish I had more time to talk about this. One Piece in general has this odd relationship with Moral Grey that the live-action series did a fairly good job of replicating, because in the actual manga, you never quite understand what, there's like, oh, the Marines are good, but they're also evil. You definitely get the impression that they're evil, but you get more the impression that people like Garp are just being foolish and helping the Marines, because the series doesn't do a great job of showing that most pirates are evil. You do run into, of course, bad pirates, but it doesn't show that as being the norm, as opposed to Luffy's crew being the exception. So it has that sort of same Moral Grey thing going on there. Something I also appreciated, Luffy early on is shown to not really know how to be a good captain, and I appreciated that carrying over. That will get a good payoff later. Zoro's fight against Mihawk was a little bit off. That's more of a choreography thing. It's really hard to portray someone like Mihawk fighting someone like Zoro, especially since Mihawk, especially these days in One Piece, someone like Mihawk is so absurdly strong that you can imagine them just wiping out entire fleets on their own, which was, to be fair, shown off in the manga, and you get a little bit of that early on with him cutting the ship in two. But their fight, yeah, the choreography, a little bit off, but it's still fine. Sanji losing a lot of blood, or no, sorry, Zoro losing a lot of blood whenever they run into Sanji. He's completely bloodless. There's no blood at all. A little bit of a discontinuity there. They seem to have reeled in some of Sanji's perversion, which I'm really glad about. It's still there, but it's nowhere near as bad as it is in the manga. His whole I'm near death, and it becomes a plot point because his nose bled because he is attracted to mermaids is probably the worst it ever got. The whole thing ends well enough. I'm sure that people watching it are probably wondering where Arlong went and if he died, which is very fitting because the same problem happens in real life, where we still have no clue what happened to him, really. He went to prison, presumably, but we don't really see him anymore past that. A general statement, characters have trouble portraying grief. Like, as far as the acting goes, the actors don't seem like they're not upper triple S rank actors or anything. But whenever it comes to portraying grief, especially compared to the manga, because of the manga, it's really over the top. When characters are sad, you can tell that they're sad. They are just utterly shattered. And the acting, they're not really great at portraying sadness. You don't get the sense that they're actually sad. But especially whenever you juxtapose it against the manga, yeah, it's not quite there, but the performances are still fine. The performances are the best whenever it's not too emotional. Their strongest suit by far is like banter and world building. Those two are excellent. Whenever it moves past that, though, it gets a little bit strange. And I also wrote down, because of the end credits, hopefully Smoker will be as threatening as he was in the manga, and I put in parentheses, ha. So, look forward to that as well. Okay, so that's it for my notes. I just wanted to throw all that in there while I still had time. So thank you for my One Piece review watching that you just did with your eyeball. And the other eyeball as well. I appreciate it. Hello, Robin. I hope that they find an actor that is suitable for you, because you are best girl. That is what is most important, most of all. I really look forward to dwarf actor from Brooklyn playing Chopper. I want that so badly now. So, again, if you have not seen the series, check it out. It's worth a binge. It was kind of surprising that they just dropped the whole thing at once. Usually for something that they think is going to succeed, they'll try to stretch it out over as long amount of time as they possibly can. Some people have said that they didn't think that it might succeed, but you can't say that while also noting that they put a huge amount of money into the product. So just a little bit strange. I'm not quite sure why they did that. But then again, it is Netflix and they make lots of bad decisions, so who knows. Anyways, I will see you guys next time. Thank you very much for watching. If you have additional thoughts, please leave them in the comments. I will get back on things, and since I have fiber now, if you're wondering, I've been more consistent about streaming. Although whenever it comes to having to do stuff like this, it occupies a lot of my time, so I can't stream super consistently as opposed to someone that actually does streaming exclusively for a living, so please understand that as well. But I am more consistent now that I don't have to worry about that. I have a crazy story about my old ISP that I've told a couple of times on stream. Maybe I'll tell that soon in my next video. I don't know. We'll see. All right. Thank you very much. Goodbye.